Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is getting worse before getting better. The healing process is one of undoing. And as we move through our, our healing, oftentimes we re-experience the darkness, or even in physical terms, the symptoms. And with emotional stuff, it can be sort of a tricky path to navigate, to recognize that we're re-experiencing things without diving into really recreating those things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, Rosalind, and good morning to everyone else who's joining us. So good to have you here with us. And we're talking about how things get worse before they get better, oftentimes. And one of the things that I speak about a lot in my practice is that if it's coming up, it's coming up to heal. And I had a conversation with a client about this yesterday. Excuse me. Where we were talking about these emotions and circumstances that sort of seem to come back around. I think we've all experienced that when something that we thought we had completed sort of rears its head again, and how it's never convenient. And sorry about that. It's never convenient, but and it's often uncomfortable. But if we can allow that it's coming up because we're ready to address it and heal it, that can help to shift our relationship to whatever this circumstance is that is arising. And so it's interesting. I've been in an experience of something for me coming up that was was long standing and really not present for the longest time. And so growing up, I had a deep, deep, deep sense. I'm sharing this so that, because I know I'm not the only one that experiences this. So maybe, me sharing it is just to be able to allow you to relate, and maybe it'll help you to to move through. So growing up, I had a deep, deep, deep sense of failure, like as an identity. And it's fascinating to me that those feelings are arising again, like not just in memory, but feeling it deep in my body as something that wasn't dissolved yet, that there's all this body memory, I'll say, from my life that uh that never got completed. And so it's interesting. We talk about the spiral of healing and how we go through these processes and they keep getting revisited. And when we revisit them, we're revisiting them from a different place and a different space of evolution. And when these things arise, it really is an invitation to dissolve it, to address it, to complete it. And so what I can say about this is that it's been deeply uncomfortable to have this stuff from the past, these feelings from the past. Good morning, Nick. Welcome. Great to have you here with us. We're talking about how in our process of healing and evolving, we get to go through the darkness to get to the light. And it's just tremendous. It's tremendously painful to be going through that stuff. And it's painful to go through it initially, to be living it as a fact, and then to be re-experiencing it from another dimension of awareness where we can recognize that it's not that it's an old construct. And so even recognizing that it's an old construct, there's tremendous discomfort from those feelings, emotions, that energy that is asking to be released. One of the things that we do in the core connection process is a visualization, typically, where it's free association of whatever shows up and the emotions that are arising during that free association, and where that emotion is embodied, what the sensation of it is in our physical bodies. And I'm just going to share some of what showed up for me in allowing myself that visualization, which isn't really generally part of the work that I do on myself, but I think it probably exemplifies the feeling that many of us might feel when we are trying to address these very deep, uncomfortable, energetic, emotional patterns. And they can be from a long time ago. This is from a long time ago. And it's interesting that it's showing up at a time when there's the intention to be sort of taking things to the next level. And when we look to evolve to the next level, what shows up is the stuff that we get to clean up before we can actually get to the next place, before we can make that evolutionary jump to the next place. We need to clean stuff up so that it's not in the way as we evolve. So it was interesting in this imaging session that I did with myself. There was this hole. It was like a vortex that was just pulling energy down into the earth. It was a hole in the ground. And I was holding on to the roots of a tree, but my body was being pulled into this hole. And my legs were sort of being flown around a bit by this vortex of energy that was pulling down into the hole, and I was holding on to the tree. And if we think about that symbolism, what we get to do as we move through these very challenging emotions and patterning and programming from our past, often these programs aren't even our own. They're laid upon us. This notion of failure was something that was reinforced over and over in so many ways. Holding on to the roots is holding on to the roots of ourselves, the core of our being, knowing our essence, and being true to that, even in this turbulence, even in this sort of windstorm that we might be experiencing, that wants to just suck us down into that darkness. And to be holding on to the roots, and also to be aware of that sensation. And what I noticed is that there was sensation in my throat and in my belly, and sort of a tightness in my core that just felt like a constriction, a contraction. And what happened in this visualization was that I managed somehow, holding on to the roots of the tree, to climb out of that hole, and then ended up climbing the tree and being on the highest branches of that tree. And again, the symbolism, it was what was coming from my other than conscious mind. I wasn't consciously constructing this, it was what was emerging. But the symbolism is symbolism that we can all relate to, I imagine, is pulling ourselves up from our roots and being in connection with that tree and climbing to its highest branches, and seeing the vast expanse of the world from that higher vantage point, right? And so it's interesting, even with that visualization, this process for me is not yet complete. I still feel it in my body. I can still feel that energy moving and processing. And I can tell you, it's uncomfortable to allow ourselves to move through that discomfort, to allow the discomfort without falling into the story. Because the story is an illusion. It is a story, and it is a way that we condition ourselves to see things, hear things, conceptualize things, experience things through a lens. And we talked about chaos the other day, and how in the process of growth and transformation, there is an undoing that is necessary before we can create a new foundation. That we need to allow things to fall apart before we can put them together in a way that is more stable, that is evolving. So there is a constant undoing and reforming and reemergence and regeneration. So there's change and growth and chaos, chaos and order, and chaos and order, and the unforming and reforming over and over. And so if we can allow ourselves to go through the discomfort and be supportive of ourselves in that process, to be willing in that process to have the discomfort and not make it mean something devastating, not make that discomfort be a bad thing, but to allow it, to allow ourselves to move through it, to allow ourselves to breathe into it, and not nurture the story that perpetuates it, not push back on the story. We can observe it, we can be aware of it, and in being aware of it, when we can identify it as story, it takes on a different tone. And we don't need to resist it. So this notion of failure and actually having taken it on as a beingness, as an identity. We've talked a lot about how if we take that on as an identity, if we take on failure as an identity, then what's necessary? It's necessary that we keep creating circumstances in which to fail. And the thing is, even though that's an unpleasant identity, it's an identity that we know. And so releasing that identity, even though we know that it's dooming us to perpetuate this pattern of pain, is something that is challenging because it means going into the unknown. If I'm not that which I knew, what am I? I'm an unknown. And I was doing a session with another client the other day too, and they were talking about the unknown being scary, and they transformed that in the process of the work to the unknown is the place where we get to play. The unknown is the place of possibility. And if we're going to be reinventing ourselves, it means stepping into the unknown. It means allowing that whatever that goop was that was congesting our cells and congesting our bodies with this old identity that kept us constrained and bound. It means releasing that. It means relinquishing that, letting it come out of our cells. And I can tell you that the physical sensations of this energy, it feels like stickiness in my cells. And is I feel it moving, literally feeling, is having sensation, like physical sensations of this energy moving. And so if in the process of going through these transformations, rather than getting caught up in the drama, rather than getting caught up in the story, we have the opportunity to see the story as a story and to recognize that it's not who we are. And in fact, most often those stories aren't even stories of our own creation. And we didn't know, we didn't even realize that we took them on. Somehow we just thought that was truth because that's how it was being presented to us. We thought that's how it is. And so we received it and we lived into it as if it were so. And we have the ability to free ourselves from that. And it can be really uncomfortable, you know, to face the stories that we lived our lives through. And how, like, for instance, this, like, what's coming back for me is a lot of different instances where I lived into that identity of being a failure. And just watching them instead of identifying with them. I know that's available to all of us. So Rosalind says, perhaps they are seeds, good and bad, sprouting to the surface, picking out the weeds in the garden to create the beauty you want to see. I love that, Rosalind. Thank you for that. That's really beautiful. So yeah, seeds. I think having the experience of this now on a new level, and even on having had it in the past and as a beingness, having those experiences has served me to be able to better serve others, because I can relate. Like, I know what it is to have that experience. And so maybe that is how we tend the garden. And I love that analogy. I don't know if there are bad seeds, but maybe there are things that outgrow their usefulness. You know what? Maybe it's interesting because I know there's a lot of conversation about invasive species versus native species, and how native species create a rich ecology around them, a whole ecosystem, whereas invasives kind of take away the energy from the natives and crowd things out and kind of can destroy the ecosystem. And I think what happens, it's kind of like these ideas, these stories that have gotten projected upon us, or that we have even created ourselves in certain cases. They're like an invasive, and they take up the whole terrain, and we get to root them out. And I'm loving this plant analogy because that's what it feels like, is rooting this out. It's funny that I was holding on to the roots of a tree, and that this tree was such an important part of my visualization, but it feels like uprooting. Like I'm feeling in my body this uprooting, this, there's sort of like this tugging and pulling and separating of these of the energy, I guess, of these old patterns that aren't truth unless we make them so. We really do create our reality, consciously or otherwise, by the stories that we tell, by the identities that we assume and embody. And we get to also allow ourselves to move beyond the limits of those things, to allow them to dissolve, to allow them to fall away, and discover what it is to step into the unknown, which actually is stepping into a greater, more authentic expression of our essential being. So if I can do it, you can do it. And when these things come up, and it can be really uncomfortable and really inconvenient, when these things come up, they're coming up because they're coming up to heal. And you have the resources to do it. Whether you choose to or not is another story. But they're coming up in service to you and your fullest expression of your essential being. That's what's happening. And you can take that opportunity or not. And if you don't, the likelihood is that you'll have another opportunity. But we need to go through the tunnel to get to the light at the end of it, right? We need to go through the darkness before we get to the light. Rosalind, thank you so much. Rosalind says, thank you for sharing what's on your mind and in your heart. Thank you. And I could, it's interesting because we have this idea about what wholeness looks like that this stuff just doesn't, it's gone. But isn't it interesting that as we awaken more and more, we have more and more the ability to deal with the deeper and deeper stuff that we didn't even know was still there necessarily, right? And we don't have to make a story up about, well, that means this, that, or the other thing about me, right? It's coming up. Life is serving us. And so we get to dance with it and see it as an opportunity. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description, and it is such a privilege and a pleasure to share these musings on being human together. And so until next time, so much love to you.